position your business for success. Why is failure so common in startups and small businesses? What's the most effective way to avoid going out of business? What does it cost us if we don't do this? Let's get into it. Welcome back to the show, the Business Mastery for Startups and Scaleups with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. Today, in episode 14, can you believe we're already 14 episodes into this show? Today in episode 14, we're going to look at how to position our business for success. Unsurprisingly, that starts with understanding our position in the market and with our audience. So first off, I suppose it makes the most sense to throw out a definition. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to be giving many definitions today. Today is all about the questions, and they're questions that you're going to need to answer for yourself and for your business. So again, I'll be giving more questions than answers, but here's one of them. So what does that mean when I say position our business? It means that we've taken the time to understand our business, its model, our audience/customer base, the competition, and how we differentiate within the unique constraints and resources that we have. So that's how we're defining it. It's our place in the universe, as it were. So let's break that down. What is our business is the first question, probably the most obvious one. What product or service do we provide? And more importantly, what does our customer get from engaging with us? Now, I'll use myself as an example. That would be easiest because I can speak most accurately to my own business. But I want you to be thinking about your own business as I'm defining. So what is my business? My business is to help other companies to consistently attract, recruit, and retain the top talent in their markets, and then to lead those folks into highly performing teams. So said differently, I help customers attract, I help them to recruit, I help them to retain, and I do leadership training. So those are the four services that I provide. And when I look at that, the next question, I guess, pretty obvious is how do we monetize? So in my instance, I have a book, Destination Employer. I have a program, imaginatively named Destination Employer Program. And I have a consulting company, Redbeard Solutions. All three of those items are monetization tools for the overall mission of the service that I provide to the marketplace. Now, back to that service for a minute, though. That's what I do. That's what I give. But what does my customer get? That might seem like a silly question. It's pretty clear what I do. If you're a startup or an early stage company, I help you find the top talent, help you engage with them, I help you to recruit them, help you to keep them, I help you to lead them. This isn't complicated. But has there ever been a startup owner, any business leader for that matter, woke up one morning and said, I need to hire a service to help me with this, and this. No, they don't care about the service of the product. They care about the outcome. There's an old advertising note from Mr. Ogilvy, one of the founders of the marketing world, at least here in the United States. And he said, people don't buy a drill. They buy the hole that it makes. And this is no different. So why is it important that we understand that? We're going to get into it more in a minute. But we need to understand what our customer gets, what our business that I just described in my own case, what it looks like from the outside. Because what I give has to be packaged in a way that makes sense to what they're looking to get. Said differently, if I can't package my services or my product well, my ideal client won't see it for what it is and might not necessarily take me up on my offer because it doesn't make sense to them. Which brings me to the next thing we need to understand. Who is our ideal customer? Now, this is a thornier one than you'd think. This is hardly a radical question to ask, and I'd be hard-pressed to believe that I'm the first person to ever say you need to know who your ideal customer is. But it's a hard truth. Again, using myself as an example, my smallest client that I've ever had was 2 people, and they didn't even have a physical office, just 2 people starting out. And my largest was state governments and everything in between. I've worked with Fortune 100 companies. I've worked with tiny startups. And again, everywhere in between. I know from 25 years of experience that the strategies and tactics that I teach work across that range of customers. So who's my ideal customer? The entire market? Not if I want to stay in business, it isn't. Why? Especially in the beginning, you've got limitations on what you can do and what you can give. And the more that you can find the person who will benefit the most from your message, from your product, from your service, the more you can funnel those resources into that area and increase the likelihood of getting traction before you run out of resources. So you don't want to ask the question, who will benefit from my product or service? You want to ask the question, who will be most receptive and get the most value from my service? Now, in my circumstance, that's startups and small businesses. Why? Because they typically don't have access to the resources of a giant company. Things like a marketing department that can help them build their employer brand. Things like large professional recruiting teams that can build passive candidate pipelines for them so that they always have access to talent. They don't have, big name leadership consultants on retainer that can come and give them advice and give them direction when they get stuck. They don't have high-powered HR consultants that can bring them cutting-edge retention strategies that are working like magic to keep folks engaged and productive. They don't have those things. And yet, they're the innovation hub for the world and the largest employer for the world. But they don't have those things. So by a service like mine providing those items to that particular demographic, they get the benefit of those big companies that they wouldn't otherwise have. So for me, there's an obvious need there. And as an added benefit, these companies being earlier stage, their systems and processes aren't well defined yet. So getting in early, I can make a big positive impact that will carry through and iterate as they grow. Because in my circumstance, as I mentioned earlier, these strategies work regardless of the size of the organization. However, if we can bake them in from the beginning, it's that much more advantageous for that organization. So my ideal customer is a startup or an early stage company, typically between 10 and 200 employees, that is looking to grow significantly, again, typically with hard to find folks, or folks that are difficult to engage meaningfully, or folks like, for example, digital marketers, salespeople, recruiters, where there's plenty of them, but a very small minority that's truly exceptional. It can really move the needle on their own. In other words, there's a lot of chaff to get through to find the wheat. So that's my ideal customer. US based, because that's where I live and I understand the laws and the culture of this country best. So US based startup or early stage company, again, typically 10 to 100 employees. That's my ideal customer. Can I do business outside of that? Yes. Do I do business outside of that? Yes. But do I target my marketing and my energy outside of that? No. Again, everything I do is targeted in that space because that's the place I can make the biggest impact and I can get the best results for both parties. It's true win-win. So now that we understand who our ideal customer is, who's the competition and how do they do what they do and what do we do different? So again, for you, this is going to be different, but understanding the competitive landscape is going to do a number of things for you. Number one, there had better be a competitive landscape. If there's none, that's not a good sign. Now, it is possible at your first to market. That is absolutely a reality. And being first to market has certain advantages, as anyone with eyes can see. But if there's no market, you have to ask yourself if that market will develop on a timeline that meets your resources. So again, I would challenge you that for most organizations out there, there will be a competitive landscape, and that's a good thing. But you want to understand how they go to market. So in my circumstance, my competitive landscape is digital and social media marketing companies that focus on employer brand. It's staffing agencies that can provide staffing services in a way differently than I teach people how to do it on their own. Number three, it's HR consultants that provide retention strategy. And number four, it's leadership trainers. What I do differently, so I understand, what they do. What I do differently is that I package all of those things into a homogeneous service that provides an outsized benefit because everything is linked together. It's links in a chain instead of independent services. And because it's the same overarching philosophy, everything works synergistically. So that's what I do different. It's not an a la carte service, it's a whole philosophy. So, what is it for you? How is your product or service different than the competition? How does your competition go to market? So for example, digital marketing firms usually work on either a project or retainer basis. So understanding how they go to market lets me know how to package my own services in that area. Staffing firms in the United States, typically the overwhelming majority use a contingency model, which is a horrible model and hasn't really changed since World War II. And it shows, HR consultants and leadership trainers typically work on a project or, again, sometimes a retainer basis. So I understand that and can package my own products in a way that makes sense. I came up with the Destination Employer Program specifically so people could do it on their own at their own self-pace. And Redbeard Solutions also has the industry's first recruitment and retention as a service program. So again, we've got a different subscription model so that folks have the opportunity to work longer term and get better results. So that's how we differentiate. We offer a homogeneous service guided by the same philosophy and packaged more like the SaaS model than a contingency or retainer or project-based service. Again, our differentiator in our go-to-market strategy. What are your resources and constraints, and how can you operate inside of them? That's the last question. Okay, so if I understand what my resources are, I have X amount of money in the bank, I have Y amount of spend, which gives me Z amount of runway before I run out of money. I've got access to these tools. That's a resource. I've got access to this professional network. That's a resource. I've got this amount of overhead. That's a constraint. Understanding these is going to help you to shape how you do things. If I know I've got $1 million in the bank and I know that my monthly spend is $100,000, then I know that I've got 10 months of runway. If I know that I've got access to certain resources, and resources, again, professional network. So that could be things like memberships to associations where my target audience resides. It could be access to tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Apollo or heck, Google Suite of workspace tools or Microsoft's Office tools. Whatever that is, it gives you insight into the types of things you can do without incurring additional expense. So the better that you can answer all of these questions that I've given you, the more likely that you'll thrive, never mind just survive. Why? Because you understand your market and your place in it. These inform you as to the decisions you should be making as you're moving forward. So again, let's look at the 5 questions. Number 1, what's your business? What product or service do you provide? And more importantly, what does your customer get from engaging with you? Number 2, what's your business model? How are you monetizing? Are there other monetization options you haven't considered yet? Number 3, who is your ideal customer? Number 4, who's your competition and how do they do what they do and how do you differentiate? And number 5, what are your resources and what are your constraints and how can you operate inside of that paradigm? So we normally talk on this channel and on this show about the people side of the business. That's what Destination Employer Program is all about. That's where the majority of my experience lives. So I always like to give evidence-based and experience-based advice, so I tend to focus there. But make no mistake, that's not the only part of your business. Again, I focus on it because it's where my experience lies. But you can't ignore the fact that your product and service is at least as important as the team you built. The way you execute on that idea is as important. Your finances are as important. So again, while it's a very important part of your business, or else I wouldn't have written a book about it or created the program, there's more to it than that. And we've dug into that today. So if you want to learn more about small business, about startup culture, about startup operations, this is the place to be. I don't understand why we're getting a lot more traction on YouTube than we are in our audio program. If you would have asked me before I started the program, I would have said the exact opposite. So if you're watching us over on YouTube, please like and subscribe and throw on a comment. Our show is growing rapidly. I'm super excited. In less than 2 months, we've grown past 1,000 subscribers, which I realize in the grand scheme of YouTube is small potatoes, but it's pretty rapid growth as far as I'm concerned. I'm super excited about it. If you are one of the folks listening on Spotify or Apple or Google Podcasts or wherever you're catching it there, please leave us a review. Again, I'd love to be able to spread the word there as well. I am passionate about the startup and small business culture. We are the drivers of the world in innovation and employment. And every bit you do to help spread that word helps all of us a great deal. Thank you very much, as always, for listening. If you haven't already, check out destinationemployer.co. And I look forward to seeing you next week.